Alright guys, so apparently I have sound now, so this is great. I won't have to write down all these crazy instructions, and hopefully it'll help you with having a little more details as we go through there as I explain this. So we're going to title this Shaded Noodle with Light Source. Okay, and so we're going to do the exact same thing we've done on the other shading with the light sources that we've done, right? So we're going to go ahead and put a light source up here. You'll need similar as the last time. Go ahead and get like a light and a dark color. I'm going to use either one of these could be light or dark. They're pretty close in value, so I'm going to use the red to draw. And then you'll also want to have like one that's darker, so like navy blue or purple, okay? But this will be at the very end, so don't really worry about that, okay? And so what you're going to do in the first step, and I am going to draw a little bit darker so you can see it, so draw lightly. All you're going to do, and it just needs to be on a half page like that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line, okay? And it's going to create basically a noodle. And however you do that's up to you. Don't get any more complicated than that, okay? So, and don't keep it pretty open. Don't let it get too tangled up, all right? Because it'll just be easier, all right? Once you do that, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a parallel line next to the one you just drew, okay? And so I'm just going to follow along like this. I'm just going to go along, and don't worry if it gets a little wider or skinnier, it's okay. Right? So that is my noodle. Alrighty? So just like that. Like I said, draw that light because there's some things going on here that you won't want to show through. Right? And just like on the other two, what we're going to do now is based on where the light source is, we're going to do a light side and a dark side. Okay? But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead, because I want this whole thing to be the color. And so go ahead and shade in side of your noodle. Okay? I'm not going to worry too much about it being real smooth. Right now, I just want to get it filled in, because as you go back over it with the layers, it'll smooth it out, right? But do get your color inside of the whole object. Okay. So give me a couple of minutes here to shade this in. And the thing that makes this more challenging than the last couple of things we've done is that your light side and dark side are going to move around because of the angles and the location of areas of this based on where the light is. Okay, so the Among Us character, we kind of did it with one of the limbs, I think the leg. It had an angle in it, and so there was some variation in where the shaded and light areas were located, but this goes kind of to the next level on that. All right, and the goal here is to understand when you have an object and light's hitting it, where the shadows go and where the midtones go and where the highlights go. And this one is a really good explanation of that. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in some obvious places and show you where the light and dark sides go, okay? So here's the light source. So my arrows are going to point to the surfaces where it's getting direct light, okay? So like for instance here, this is going to be light side, this is going to be dark side, okay? as I go down the object, what's going to happen, and this is one of the tricky parts, so if that light continued through here, right, if it's straight up and down or so the light's going to still be hitting here, here, but here where it starts to go, turn away from the surface, right, what's going to happen is that now the light's going to come around here and start to hit on the side of this. So you think, oh, well, I can just do dark side here and continue here. No, it needs to move to the far side from the light, right? So in the middle, what I do is about halfway down, I just change the side I'm putting the shading on. Okay? And so the light's still hitting here, right? The light's still hitting like right here. Right? So I'm going to keep the shadow on this side. Just like that, right? See, it switches sides right here. Now the other thing on this, the noodle's going to have one part that goes over and one part that goes under. So as you shade this, for instance, I want this part of my noodle here to go over this part, and so with the light hitting here, I have to make the darker area, right? But I'm going to leave that part of the noodle open so it looks like it's going over the top of this section here, okay? And same thing down here, right? I want this to go under that. So when I shade that dark side, I'm going to leave it open right there so it looks like it goes underneath it, right? Under, right there, okay? And now I'm going to continue to shade. So I'm going to make this one go over. So as I come in here, I'm going to draw an arrow, right? Light, light. So dark side comes back to here until it gets to the top, because the light's going to come across there. And so you're going to bring this shadow, basically where the shadow starts here, it ends here. Okay, that's kind of the base rule for that. If a shadow starts somewhere, it ends somewhere else, right? And then same thing here, I'm going to have this cross under this. So light's hitting here. Now here's the tricky part, right? So light's hitting here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the shaded area just off the edge, right? Now definitely here, this part's on the back side of that, right? So I left a little open here and here, but where it's definitely on the back side away from the light, I'm going to put the shading there, okay? And then it's going to go under this, all right? As it goes this way, it turns more away from the light, so I'm just going to put my shaded area right here. Okay? And then as I come around this way, now all of a sudden we're on the far side of the light, so I'm going to go ahead and return that shaded shape to that back side. It's on the far side of the object from where the light's hitting. Okay? Now, like I said, it gets kind of tricky. So like right here, like the light's definitely hitting here, but now it's going to hit here, right? So what I'm going to do is, like I said, where that ends, I'm going to start to shade back on the other side. And it's far more complicated than this. There's all the other levels, but we're kind of doing the very, very simple version of this, right? And so what I'm going to do is, because of the light hitting that, I'm just going to keep the shade on that side, okay? And so with this part, same thing. It's going to go that way. We're still on the far side of the light on this object, far side of the object from the light, right? But as it turns here, right, the light's coming through here, and all of a sudden the light hits here. So what you got to do here, you got to, right about here, you got to flip that again, okay? So that's really the tricky part of all this, is knowing where where to move the shadow to the opposite side, okay? And same thing here, right? It's on the far side of this object, but then if I draw a line here, that's where the light hits the edge, so I'm going to stop that shadow here, and then it begins right there. So depending on what your noodle's shaped like, you're going to have to kind of figure that out, right? So wherever the light source is, just with your pencil, just kind of run it, and like, if I run across that surface right there, that's still getting light, so the shadow is going to be on the opposite side, but once it comes over here and it's turned away, right, same thing here, right? Light's hitting here, light's hitting here, but once it turns the corner here, that's when you can start to make that shadow. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and I'm going to darken that up and just kind of establish that a little bit more. But don't put, because this is actually going to be our middle value, don't put 100% pressure on there. But do come in and richen it up a little bit. To where you can really see the difference between the two. And I just want to make sure that's real obvious that that's a a light and a dark side before going further. But you can already see that's got some nice form to it, right? Okay. So one of the things further down the road on this, but we want to go ahead and put that in here right now, is I'm going to take this same color, and so because there's light hitting out, there's going to be a cast shadow. So if it's touching the ground, you're going to have a dark edge on it. So let's say wherever and this goes where the shadow pieces are. So let's say on this is touching the surface, right? So what I'm going to do here is on this bottom edge, I'm going to go ahead and hopefully you can see this. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put along this edge where it has a shadow, I'm going to go ahead and put like almost 100% pressure there, okay? Because this thing isn't flat, it's round. Now definitely be careful if your piece is going underneath another one. Don't draw through that, right? It's got to pass under it. Now here where it goes over, I'm not going to put one, but I am going to put it on the other side here for a little bit, okay? So you want to add that. So wherever your shadow side is, on that edge of your object, go ahead and add that pressure so it looks like it's got like a little dark shadow on the back side of it. But just remember, if the piece goes under, don't draw through that. And you're going to make all this darker later, so just as long as you put it on there so you know where it's at, right? But see that, even adding that color intensity, which gives a little darker value, that starts to give you some more form. Like on this one right here, right? I'm going to go ahead and darken it, and make sure you stop where it goes over this one. Well, you can actually, because since we're doing a thin line right now, if it goes over something, you can do it, but don't make it very thick. Okay, so if it goes over the top, keep it real skinny. And just continue. But where the dark edge disappears, stop with that line. Okay, so I'm going to come back around here, right? And I am going to put one here, even though there's a little bit of an edge on it. I'm going to stop right about there. Okay, same thing here. As I go over the top of this one, I'm going to make sure I keep the line really skinny. I'll show you what we're going to do with that. But so darken that. Right, if it goes under, don't draw it. If it goes over, just keep it real skinny. Okay. So that's looking good. See, it already looks like it's got 3Dness, it's on the ground, right? So here's something fun that you can do that'll give you more depth. So right here, I've kind of got a little curve on the top of my noodle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that look like it's actually off the surface somewhat. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flare this line out a little bit, like that. So then it looks like the thing is kind of going, whoop, goes upwards, right? Or like this, whoop, it goes upwards. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my second color, right, and I'm going to start to add to it, right? So my green's only going to go in the shadow area. So I'm going to leave the red, the middle and light value open, but I'm going to go in and add this. Now I'm not going to add it very dark. This is going to be like on the minions, right? But you can already see I want the colors to work through each other, right? So I can see red and green here, but it looks real dark on the screen. That's good because you want that value, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in that dark area, I'm going to go ahead and throw my second color in there. Now don't do it on the very, very shadowy area, that little line we made. Leave that alone for a little bit. But on your other areas where you have that dark side of it, go ahead and throw your second color in there. But don't kill the underneath color. And I usually work this pretty fast because I'm going to refine it later, but it helps me to kind of move ahead and get my colors where I want them to be. Okay. And just remember, don't color through something if it goes under it. That's one of those things that's real easy to do because you get all going. Get all going. And what's cool about this, if you know how to do this, like you could write your name in cursive and make it look like a shoestring or something, right? You could make it look all 3D. You can make it into like a piece of plastic. You know, you could put a texture on there that makes it shiny like plastic, or you could put a texture in there that makes it look like a shoelace or a rope or anything like that, right? So it has a lot of applications once you kind of understand how it works, all right? So that's looking pretty good right there. Let me turn the brightness up on this a little bit. Zoom this in as well. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding that red in, right? Because I want this to be a red object, so what I'm going to do is right above the dark area, I'm going to leave, you do want to put some color in here, but the red's so intense, make it real light, okay? So bring some more color into this, but barely, just enough to give it that color you're using. Because up to now, I've kind of kept it really light and scribbly and pink, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to add a little more color in there just to make it more colorful, make it more intense. Okay? So I'm going to do that throughout the whole object. Like I said, it's a light side, so I'm not going to put very much pressure on there because I want it to look light compared to the dark side. Okay. All I'm doing is kind of refining the edge, making sure there's color in there. Put a little green in there. Okay, and so that's what you want to do next. Come in here and just fill it in with like a 10 to 15% value, very light pressure, but definitely show the color in there. Okay. So yeah, there you go. So once I have that colored in and I know where my dark and light side is, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to start to add a little pressure about, I'm going to add that same color, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to add a little pressure to divide that shape into two pieces again. So I've got like the light side, the dark side, all right? I'm going to have a little bit of an area where it's light and then darker red. So you want to have like that's going to be your light value, your middle value, your dark value, right? So it's kind of on this one, it's the middle value area is pretty thin. It's almost like a color strip that sits between your light and your dark value. And while I do that, I'm going to throw that red back into the shadow area for just another layer of it, okay? But I'm not killing it, right? I'm bringing the contrast up. So handle that pretty gingerly. Use a lot of like finesse on it, right? And remember, it's high contrast, right? You want dark, darks, light, lights. And so this is kind of the part of it where we're going to start to make that look like it's got some pretty dark shadows. But you can see I'm trying to put like a darker red area between the light and the shadow. Just take your time on this, because if you get real sloppy, this object's not very, there's not a lot of room for detail because it's pretty skinny. And so this is, if you don't keep it nice and tight while you're doing it, it will get a little messy. It'll kind of lose the effect. Okay, so something like that. All right. And then after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my green again, and I'm going to go back in, and now I'm really going to start to try and darken that dark side, but still keeping the color combinations intact. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm broadening the contrast range. All right, so you want to go through that, do that. And so what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go, because we're going to go back to this, okay? So what I'm going to do now is add like an effect on here that makes, so whenever this noodle goes over the other noodle, right, it's not just flat going straight through it. So what happens, it gets airborne, right? And so what you have to do is wherever it's going over the other piece, like we did up here, how we flared that shadow out like that, right? You have to do the same thing here. So this noodle's going up, and so the shadow has to come off the shape somewhat, okay? And it does it on both sides until it lands back on the ground, okay? So what I've done there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put my green in there just so you can see it. So what this is doing here is now, ooh, that looks good. Now it looks like it's literally sitting on top of, now it looks like this is like literally sitting on top of that, okay? Now there's another little crazy thing to do. We'll do that later. But so you want to do that over here, right? And if it comes over here and starts and goes down at a big angle, then you have to create a little bit more of a flare on it, right? It's got to do the same thing over here, right? It goes up pretty quick. And this is where you want to be real tidy, because it's real easy to lose the shape of your noodle right there. You gotta keep that line intact. So just take your time, watch what you're doing, right? So you can see how that's nice. It looks like now it's sitting on the top of that, and you'll keep doing it over here. So if you got and you have to do it on the shadow side, okay? So don't do that on the light side. On the side that you got the shadow, it's going to flare out a little bit, right? Come back in with your dark color. And add that in. Now it'll look like that's going over. So, like on this one, because they're so close together, this one's kind of just floating over the top of both of them, right? And this is the thing. You got to think about what it's doing, right? You can't just get in there and go, oh, boom, boom, it touches the ground every time, because Mr. Seymour said it goes back down to the ground after it gets on the other side. Well, it depends, right? So like that one's floating over the whole gap. So you want to make sure it looks like that. Now over here, kind of go back to the way it was, right? It just goes back down to the ground, right? And so I'm going to go in with the green. Right. And like on here, those shadows should line up. So I'm going to come over here and, like I said, you gotta make sure everything stays lined up, right? Okay. So now this is great. You've got these like floating shapes, and now it really looks 3D. Okay. The other next level thing is, since these guys are curved, what happens here is this shadow is here, right? But since that surface curves away, what you got to do on your shadow, there's still a shadow on this side, right? But what you got to do is you got to make it follow the curve, right? So on the back side, where this shading is, that shadow, it's not going to be over here. It's going to come here. It's going to make like a little curved triangle right there. And you'll see, I mean, I know it's kind of far away, but you can see it has a curve to it. That helps the form as well, right? So like over here, right? This is on the dark side of that right there. So this shadow that's going through here, it has to go up, pinch here because they're together, and then when it moves away, you got to put that little curve on there, right? And if you put that curve on there, that'll make it look really 3D. So like right up here, right, same thing. Whammo. Okay. So if you start to do those like next level detail things, it's going to be awesome looking. And what I'm going to do here as well is I'm going to go back and I'm going to add the green into the shadow areas. So what I want to do is I want to darken those values. Okay. So that shadow line that I made on the ground, I'm just going to go back and start to run that second color through that, and you can see how dark it's getting, right? That's now all of a sudden we're getting the wide value range, and you're going to get your dimension that you want out of this. Okay? But just remember, when you're doing that, stop wherever the shadow stops. And I'm putting quite a bit of pressure on it, but I'm still trying to see the two colors at one time, because I like that color buzz, right? But put that second color into that shadow all around the object. So anywhere you have this little shadow on the ground here, right? Make sure that second color comes into it. And this video is not really doing justice to the color. When I put it up on canvas, I'll have my example so you can actually see what it really looks like. Because it really does, it's really cool the way the colors act together to create that color energy. Yeah, like that. Be careful because I ran right into that part, right? And that's, you don't want to do that. You want to keep it clean and tight and keep your shapes intact. Right. So that's looking nice in 3D. And I mean, you can keep going. You can come back in here if you want to richen up the colors, right? I'll come back on this. Typically what I do is when I'm darkening and lightening something with two colors, one's the darkening color, the other one's the color intensity one. So it may make it darker, but I'm not going to use the green for color intensity because the red's the brightest. And so if you're using like orange and blue, right? Use the orange, use the blue to darken, but the orange to intensify the colors. So in that shadow, I'm going to come back in with this red, and I'm going to intensify my shadow area, give it more color. And if you want to darken it a little bit, come back with the second color, right? So lighter color intensifies right here, darker color darkens. And if you use them back and forth, it'll create that value. Like I said, the video here is not really doing the color on this justice. It really looks cool. And like I said, if I'm coming up to the edge of this, I'm going to make sure I be real careful so I don't color into the shape, right? And you can see if I put more pressure on there, you know, it gets darker, but it gets more colorful, but it also gets darker, right? And I just go through this and I keep refining. I've got some really splotchy areas here, so I'm going to use a nice little touch on there and make sure that's all even. All right. Intensify that. Okay. And if you do that, right, you're going to have this super cool looking 3D thing. And remember, it's always about light edges against dark edges. That's what gives you the form. Okay. Now, I talked about this with the Among Us. You know, if you want to use more than two colors, you can. So for me, I want to darken this a little bit more, right? So I'm coming in with a color that's even darker. You could use like navy or purple. And what I'm going to do is I'm only going to put this where it's the very darkest. And so that's going to be inside the shadow, not on the object at all, but wherever I've got my shadow lines, right? So what I'm going to do here is wherever I got my shadow lines on that dark side of that shape right there, I'm going to come in with this one just to create a real dark value. Right. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and get some color combinations, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in with some pretty good pressure because I want that contrast, right? Now I'm not going to put it here on that little curved shadow because there's light coming in there and it's already dark enough, but wherever that noodle is against the ground, I am going to throw the purple in there. Like right there, see how I went through that? See how I went through that shadow right there? You really can't see it, but I put that line through that shadow, and working with this dark, with next to dark there, now it becomes something that's like more like real life and it's more believable. So that's like one of those next level detail things you can do. Like I said, it gets real complicated. So like right here, where I have the shadow kind of coming off because it's going up, I'm not going to put this purple here, but I am going to put it right at the base. Right? And I got it here. Whoops, sorry guys. If it's a video, I got to have it to where you can watch it, right? All right. So if you got that, perfect, right? Now there's one more thing I'm going to do. I'll be right back. So, fourth color, yellow, right? So what I'm going to do to give it super color pop is I'm just going to go ahead on the highlight side here. I'm going to make my light colored, so I'm not going to make it just white, right? And so what I'm doing here is I'm taking yellow, and the yellow is going to come back, and it's just going to be on the bright edge of the object. And this looks, you can't really see it, but it looks so good. And if you understand this concept right here of like putting colored light on something, then you can, what you can do is you can shade things for different part of the day, right? So like let's say you wanted to have a picture that was nighttime. Well, you use like a blue for the light, right? Because it's moonlight. Use an orange or a yellow. It could be like a red if it was sunset. If it was a specific color light, like you were, let's say you were at a place where it had color lighting, you know, you could add those colors of that light source onto your highlight areas, and when you do, it just gives it all this color pop, right? So that's basically it. Like I said, come up with your own noodle shape, and that's kind of the challenge, to figure out where the light's hitting it and what's the nearest side to the light, depending on where it's at. What's the furthest side of the light, depending on where it's at. Okay? But like I said, work with your two colors, right? Add that third color for just the darkest area, and then come on here with that. Yellow is the best one to use for that. And do your highlight, and I bet you'll be pretty impressed with the way it looks. So good luck with that. This will be up on Canvas shortly, and we'll see you next video. Thanks. Goodbye. I can get out of here. Hold on.